has transpired in those 23 years and how and where we are at this point. Like I mentioned in the post, some of us were alive, some of us were probably not alive. So I want to get a perspective from our audience as to what has gone down and what do you remember about September 11th, 2001? If you were alive, where and what were you doing when you heard the news? And how has literally our nation changed since that unfortunate incident? So it's going to be an open conversation. I hope that everybody can share and chime in. I had a conversation with my daughter maybe couple weeks ago, and she was saying, "Oh, we're reading about September 11th in history books," and I'm like, "Oh wow, okay." So it's been a while. So that was a little interesting to hear that they're already reading about it in history books, right? Isaac, you have your hand up, sir.
Yes. You had said you had asked about our experience of when that day happened. I
Correct.
think I believe I was in fourth grade or something around there, fourth or third. I think it was fourth grade, and they had the TV go on about there was something on the news that was happening, and we all saw it. And I think everybody in my classroom was crying, from what I remember, and from like weeks after that, like it was really, really hard to like talk about stuff like that because, you have family and you have friends that have families that are part of the fire department and stuff like that. And it was a very, very hard time for sure. It's not something, you know, you think about and you're just like, you can't just dismiss it. It's something that's always going to be in the back of your brain and it actually happened. And, yeah, that's my experience.
Well, thank you for sharing. And you were probably in the fourth grade. What is that? About 8, 10 years old, somewhere around there, if I'm correct. And
Should have been around there. Yeah.
and that's it's a very hard time to actually witness destruction like that and
Yeah.
incidents like that, right? Very difficult time. But thank you for sharing, and then we'll get into what has happened and how have you seen our nation change since that unfortunate incident. So I'm gonna reach out to Mindy. Mindy, I don't know if you recall exactly what you were doing when you actually got the news of September 11th back in 2001, but can you share some of your perspective, remembrance, and or recollections of that day? Don't hear you. Anybody else hear Mindy?
I think you kind of touched on it. I can actually remember exactly where I was that day. I remember I was in middle school. My parents were in the middle of building our house, so we were in an apartment. I remember exactly what room we were in, and I remember seeing the news. Right. The fact that our memory, we can go to that level of detail for events on this scale. And I live in New Mexico at the time, and so right, New York was really far away, but it was I think the first time since Cold War era, right? Oh, we're not as safe as we thought we were. And the people we thought were our biggest concerns maybe weren't our biggest concerns. I think that was the shift I saw was who we considered our threats against the United States slightly shifted, and we didn't realize we were as safe as we thought we were, that we didn't have the mechanisms in place to protect us as a people. Um, I'm in defense. I've been in DoD, Department of Energy. I work on nuclear weapons, right? Like, um, to say that event maybe caused me to go that direction's probably not accurate, but I think it's probably a subconscious level of I can see the importance of deterrence. I can understand where that mindset comes from like a policy perspective. And so I think maybe that's how that event impacted me kind of going through today is I was probably pretty open-minded going into defense. I know a lot of folks are really hesitant to go into defense-based industries. But I think that event shifted my perspective of we can't totally take that out of the equation and how do we blend philosophies, right? Ideally, I don't want weapons in the world, but weapons exist in our world. So how do we cope, deal with that? And I think that event triggered what can we do?
Yeah, and that's a very, very interesting and touchy subject, right? During that time frame, there was very, very vocal chief in command at that point that said that there was weapons of mass destruction at certain locations, and that was one of the big things that led the U.S. Army and armed forces to continue moving forward. And you know, like you mentioned, weapons. So that was in a certain way a manner to bring the whole nation on board to attack the powers that be that had attacked the U.S., right? Right or wrong, that's what happened. But this is a conversation to go ahead and kind of gauge and bring awareness and remember what we were doing and how we were dealing with this at that particular moment in time. And through the years, 23 years later, how we're still remembering this date, right? Isaac, you have your hand up, sir.
Yes, I think another thing to note too is I think every American that was alive during that time that remembers this day can like feel the same way as I do. I think we all felt like we all had been attacked, even though it was in one central area of New York. I think I could remember like it felt like it was happening to me. You know, like that could have been my family. That could have been, you know, my friend or, you know, somebody that I knew that got killed during that day, you know, because of that reckless act. And I just think for everybody kind of came together in that year or in the months that, you know, of it happening. A lot of people just felt like, man, I felt like I got attacked, you know, like this is my security that's at breach, you know, like it's hard. It's kind of hard to put into words, but yeah, just thinking back, I can remember like everyone just felt like they were, you know, like they were at risk, you know, they weren't safe.
Thank you, Isaac. That's great insight. Mina, you have your hand up?
I do. And good day to everyone. I wanted to share what I vividly went through,
Yes.
what I remember,
Yes.
and what I recognize in terms of safety. Isaac, you're spot on. Mindy, you had shared exactly where you were in another state, not knowing, you know, many people didn't know where Washington is, you know, type of a thing, but they just heard news. So let me take it back. I'm listening to my instinct in the mornings, what we do. We have two young children, and both of my daughters were in private school. And so we continue with taking them there. We weren't sure if we were going to. What started everything is that we normally watch TV to wake up to the news. We watch the news. I was an employee of the Boeing Company in El Segundo, at the time, corporate headquarters. My husband as well, working in the satellite division, which is Satellite Development Center, which is also very, I mean, just not even a mile from LAX, the airport. And the reason I'm giving you all this little geography is, and we live probably 20 minutes with no traffic, a direct shot, because I'm in the South Bay, in the Torrance, Redondo Beach area, for those of you that are familiar. So given that we are talking about what is the recollection I have of that morning of 9/11 was that I saw the news. I heard my husband said, Mina, get up, get over here. I go, okay. I'm still working on the kids, getting them going. He goes, we have something going on here, and it doesn't look like it was just an accident. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, we're being attacked. I go, what? Where? You know, kind of a thing. So he was reacting from what he was watching on the news. And so here I am coming from the other side of the house, which was from the bedroom, and watching on the TV screen. And we saw the Twin Towers, not only once, but that's when he called me, when he saw the first one. When the second one hit, he said, we definitely are being attacked. He said, I don't know how our day's going to go today, but let's get the kids to school like they're supposed to be. And of course, they maintained a certain curriculum that day. We were afraid if we don't go to school, we're not going to be able to make to work and all these kind of things. So we said, best thing to do is keep them safe by going to the school. Let's report to work. So Gil and I get on the 105 freeway, which is just off of the 405 freeway where we got to connect. quiet. It's not the hustle and bustle that we normally have right by LAX going to El Segundo. Not only that, how many other aerospace companies are there? We have Raytheon. We have Northrop Grumman. All of these, which still exist to this very day in the same locations. So my recollection to tell you, when you're in a fury, you're being attacked, you have children, you have a house, we're thinking, okay, he automatically said, that's Washington, but I bet you there's going to be something else. What happened? The Pentagon got hit, right? After. So he starts grumbling and going all through this stuff. He goes, look, we have a urgent satellite thing. I got to get to the office. I said, okay, and we carpool. So I said, okay, let's drop off the girls and then we'll get into the office. So I get into the office. As we're walking in, it's like a morgue. Okay. For people that are not familiar with that, it's like we're walking into a funeral home and it's so quiet like that. There's not many people there. They had a prerogative to stay home and do what they needed to do, which like how many others, millions did probably, right? So we went into the office. I wanted to report in and I said, are we designed to be here today? Is this something that is going to happen? Because, well, to be honest, we have a lot of people missing here. We don't know how we're going to be productive today with this situation because they called it a, what's the word I'm trying to think of when they say we're being attacked? The Pentagon, the news, they had called it something about a worldly attack or something like this. So we weren't sure for aerospace how that was going to turn on. The TVs were on, certain ones that we know there in the particular departments where we were working, because some of them don't allow even TVs, that kind of thing. So they gave us an announcement and said for those that would like to return and they have their responsibilities at home, we understand. So we probably stayed till maybe noon and then we tried to, get home. And so we had the kids in school until they had to be. And the reason I'm giving you all of this from the morning is because we were nervous. We were nerve-wracked the entire day. It affected our appetite. Some of us, our health. That feeling that you just got. So I think Isaac mentioned that it affect you. You felt that you were attacked personally. You were, your security. And we said, what's next? What could be next? And so the alert went out to the point where now that I'm an employee, we work in aerospace. Let me move on ahead a little bit. We have a destruction going on. We don't know who and why until when. Not even the same day. The next day and the next day. Long story short, we had 2 employees that were on the flight that went in the first time. And they're El Segundo employees. We lost them. We honor them to this day. You could see an employee walking in the hallway, next thing you know, they're not there. That was the effect in El Segundo. For those that were working with me at the time, they know. I had my children young. They are now 12 and 14. When it comes to talking about this, because it shook us up so much that it affected a lot of things. I have a cousin who's a fireman. He's retired now. Where did it happen? In Washington, right? The towers.
New York and
New York.
Yep.
Exactly. But in Washington, where the Pentagon got hit later, right?
Yes.
Okay. So putting my geography back where we had to be, they called all fire departments from all over the states to get over there as soon as they possibly could. But those that were already there didn't have a chance, as you know. So when you have family getting involved is there too and saying, how can we help and how can we get over there? That affected our family for a second tragedy in our lifetime. So I just want to share that because it stays with you. You want to protect and you see what you're going to do for next time. And even though in your aerospace, we lost 2 people and those were on the plane, on the attack, not knowing that their life was going to be ending right there.
Thank you for sharing that insight and your personal experience, Mina. And that's why I brought the topic to the table today. Obviously, September 11th being today, I wanted to commemorate and be able to open the platform to have us share our perspective, our thoughts, our feelings, and our recollections so that we could definitely, have a conversation about this. Leo Soto, you, I'm assuming, lived at around that time over in the East Coast. I want to get your perspective because in the West Coast we got affected by it, but we were like 2,000 X miles away from the incident. And as you've heard, we were impacted at several levels, right? But I want to get your perspective literally as an individual that was possibly living there at that time. What was going on? What did you experience? What do you recall? What was the feeling like during that day 23 years ago for you?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lázaro. As you mentioned, yes, you're correct. I was living in New Jersey at that time when 9/11 happened. And it's funny because you don't remember a lot in my time in high school, but I remember that day. I was in a class and they made an announcement over the speaker that a plane hit the World Trade Center. And you kind of just, wonder what happened. They didn't give a lot of details. We're thinking maybe a small charter plane, whatever happens. But then maybe 20, 30 minutes later, they make another announcement saying a second plane has hit the second tower. And that's when everybody's like, yo, like, we're being attacked. Like, what's going on? I remember then that day, maybe for the rest of the day, they actually gathered students in different areas and we started watching the news. That's the only thing we did. They literally put on the news and were showing live reporting of everything going on and how the towers came down, etc. I do remember the day of, a lot of parents drove into school to pick up their kids. Just the fear because we weren't too far from that area in New York. Where I grew up in Jersey, where I went to high school, if I remember correctly, in a straight line, it is only about 12 miles away from the World Trade Center in a straight line. But yeah, parents were picking up their kids left and right. Everybody was kind of in a state of shock and awe. Like, what do we do? What's happening? I remember there was teachers who knew people who worked there. So that became a thing of who's impacted. Do we know anybody? I know in my family, we didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody directly. So, we were thankful for that. But then obviously you see other people in mourning, other people scared. So it definitely was an impact. And as far as going forward in the immediate weeks and months after, in the state of New Jersey, the New Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway are our two main highways. And they were completely shut down. Only emergency vehicles to and from the World Trade Center were allowed to be on those highways. If you were caught on that highway, it was, I forget, there was some ridiculous fine, but we were impacted just our day-to-day lives because we needed to get our fire department, our police department out there to help with the wreckage. So day-to-day definitely was an impact. Again, and it's interesting because I was in high school and I saw all this happening, right? So my life definitely was, I was a little, you could say almost tone deaf into like the realities of the real world. You can say that was an impact that we went through that was like, this is the real world. This is unfortunately things that you deal with as a kid. You're oblivious to things that are happening, but these are very real things. And I think that was the first time as teenagers that we got an introduction. Hey, welcome to the real world. And not the most positive aspect to have to get that introduction, but a reality nonetheless that we all had to live through.
Well, thank you, Leo, for sharing your recollection of that. 12 miles is not that far away. It does bring up a question. Maybe I want to know at a personal level. Obviously, you felt a little shaken up, but at the same time, 12 miles away, when the towers actually started coming down, I'm pretty sure that there must have been some sort of shake, some sort of feeling. What happened when the towers actually went down? And FYI, California is on the West Coast, and New Jersey, New York are on the East Coast. So for you, it must have been like 9:30 when the first incident started happening. For us, it was literally 6:30 in the morning here. So we were, like Mina alluded to, we were just literally waking up for the most part, and it caught us by surprise. But for you, you were already in school. Everybody was literally at work. And I want to get your perspective as to what actually happened, and were you able to feel that shake? What physical activity happened that you could recollect?
That's a great question. It's distant enough that we actually in our area, we didn't see or hear anything. And because we're in class, and this is the era of pre-cell phones, pre-smartphones, so we didn't know what was happening until they made the announcements over the loudspeaker. And a funny thing is, or interesting thing is, I remember then for the immediately as an aftermath, they actually did have um, counseling available for any students who needed it afterwards. And I kind of remember just like, I'd never heard of counseling or grief counseling or anything. And I remember that's the first time I ever heard of those kind of things. And again, I'm a teenager at this point. And if I remember correctly, I was about 14, turning 15 years old at that time, a month away from turning 15. So again, a lot of this is brand new to me. Again, in my area, we didn't see or hear anything. Interesting part is that if you go more north Jersey, later on when I went to Rutgers, I was told that there were students who live in Hoboken, Jersey City, et cetera, right across the Hudson River, and they had a plain eagle-eye view of the World Trade Center and all the smoke and debris and everything you've seen on TV in terms of the smoke and the fear of seeing that. A lot of people actually did witness that in person, because if you live in that part of Jersey right across the Hudson, you have a plain view of the skyline and what used to be the Twin Towers. So thousands of people were there watching. And because it's the pre-smartphone era, it was just a plain eye point of view. It was no recordings, no anything. They felt it. They told me it was a shake in the ground. It was like a lot of gasp in the air, a lot of frightening things. And because it was so close, a lot of people were in fear that, oh my God, we could be next. And along the East Coast and my city in New Jersey that I live in, they have one of the biggest oil refineries along the East Coast. So there was a fear that that could be attacked. And so, and again, all these fears were very real. And you kind of just, as a teenager, I didn't know what to do, but I kind of just went day by day living my life as, hey, what else can I do? I'm a teenager. And there was a lot of events afterwards in terms of, wear your red, white, and blue, show camaraderie, show your patriotism, show your love for your country, and we participated in all that as best we can. And I remember the big message that they were trying to give was, do not let them win. Let's continue to live our life not in fear, but, continuing to live to show that we will not give in to terrorism, etc.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for sharing that insight. Great insight. I'm going to shift over to Victor Colomina Ruiz. And I'm assuming, Victor, you mentioned in conversations that you and I have had that you're from Spain. So I don't know if you were in Spain at that time, but I want to get your perspective as as an individual that was outside of the U.S. at that time. What was the perspective internationally as to the incident 23 years ago? And if you can share your recollection from that point of view to what you've kind of heard for the last couple of minutes that you joined us, what can you share in regards to September 11 of 2001 that you remember?
Mm-hmm. So that's thanks, Arthur. I was actually gonna ping you to share that, because so first is like nerve-wracking to hear from you guys like how it was felt here, because again we're far away, right? So it's a different how it feels. Nevertheless, I feel like, especially from Europe or Western Europe, we feel the kind of like cultural connection with North America, right? So even though it was of course not attack on us, it felt attack on the lifestyle that Western countries have. So it's definitely intense and felt this way, right? Like it was not, I mean, it's like as if not, it doesn't happen in your home, but it happened to your neighbor, right? So that was that. Interestingly enough, and like in a very short tangent, September 11 is the national day of Catalonia, which is like Barcelona is in this region of Spain. It's called Catalonia, and we used to be a country until Spain kind of like invade us. But so I remember vividly not being at school. I was home, right, because it's the national fest. So like it was a festive day, and I remember I was at home, and I was my mom was like preparing lunch, and I was like on the TV, and I saw it happen. I saw the towers and like the smoke for the first plane, and I remember screaming to my mom, like, hey, a plane hit a tower, like one of the towers, right? And again, like they were known as the towers, right? Because like everybody knew them. And my mom was like, no, maybe a movie or something. And she always says that I said, no, they're playing this movie in every single channel, right? So again, it was not at 9 in the morning, it was not 6 in the morning, it was like in the middle of the afternoon, right? So we were seeing it live and everybody was like paying attention if you were paying attention, right? So we saw it developing and definitely it was very, very shocking. As I say, I feel like we didn't have this feeling that you have been sharing about immediate threat for us, but I was 9 years old and I remember vividly how it was shaking everything that we knew, right? And posterior to that, I mean, yeah, of course, U.S. went to a war in Iraq and Spain pulled troops also to go to that war. Spain, UK went to war with in Iraq. So we lived all these repercussions, right? And how it definitely, again, if you travel anywhere in the world and you use a plane, you see the aftermath of that, right? So it's, again, very American and definitely we didn't feel it as a direct threat as you guys have been sharing, but it shook the lifestyle that we had like all over the world. So it's actually pretty shocking.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for sharing your perspective as an international observer at that time of what you saw, right? And thank you for hinting at how the nation has changed, not only the U.S., but the whole international flight travel, checking in, TSA security, screenings and whatnot, all of that developed immediately after this incident, to be honest with you. And I read a comment and somebody brought it to, I still remember pre-2001 that a lot of family members without an airplane ticket could literally walk up literally to the door and see your loved ones get on the plane. Right, and that's unheard of now. If you don't have a plane ticket, you cannot get into the actual waiting room area of where you actually board the plane. But that was common back in the 90s and even 2000. That was still common, and after 2001, that literally changed. So, Mina, you had your hand up earlier before Victor started, so go ahead.
Yes, so to add to this recollection, in terms of a professional having to report back to work, I worked as a administrative assistant at that time to Mr. Art Rosales, who at that time also had a lot of involvement with the satellite launches. So there was something huge going on still that he had to attend to. He knew what we were all going through. He asked me if anyone calls into the office and they prefer to stay home, that's fine. He was giving me some directions there. So when you're an assistant and you are not familiar with the protocol, or let's turn it around and say you are familiar somewhat with protocol, as I was, but it wasn't really my intent to, suggest, okay, this, that, and the other. He's my boss. He's a supervisor. He's telling me what's related to the work. He realized what happened, but he's so into, we are getting ready for a launch. Well, did that incident affect the launch? Yes, it did. Now, I'm only speaking what I can to let you know. I'm not an engineer. I don't have an engineering background, but boy, do I gravitate to the STEM industry. All because of the aerospace company, okay? That companies, from Hughes Aircraft to Hughes Space and Communications, then being acquired by the Boeing company. Having lost 2 employees that we did not know for quite a while, and I say a while because it felt like, oh my gosh, when are we going to know that anyone was here, there, and the other? One of the protocols that came across us was who is on travel, who is in New York, who were on those aircrafts. The assistants need to have those kind of records. Then they at that time, we still had a travel office that we had to accommodate. Eventually, when they started reducing the travel assistants, the travel office, okay, the Boeing travel office started eliminating positions so that the assistants would take care of the travel. And now even the employees now themselves, unless you're a high-end executive, have assistants that are still supporting you to travel. Do you imagine what that led to how we had to report, oh, who is on travel and who is where? Everybody had to, get that happen and turn in some important information right away. That's how we found out that we had 2 of our own employees, unfortunately, on the first plane that hit. Or I may be in the, don't quote me, it could have been even the second one. Chad was one, and then the other gentleman was Filipino. Both of their names are in a little memorial in El Segundo in the building that we call the Hall of Flags. Leo, I think you're probably very familiar with that hallway. Has all the flags that we've had contracts with in our businesses. And all of the fellows that are on there, male and female, they share a beautiful, anyone who's done a patent is on, as many times as they have patents, are on that hallway. There is a special memorial at the entrance. I don't know if they've changed this yet, but it's in a plaque of those 2.
Thank you. Thank you, Mina. That's great insight. Thank you for sharing that.
You never know, right? You don't know working
exactly.
in a system, but you're going to need to know who's on travel. And if it's travel creates your hat, you have to know words and you have to work quick. I remember going through that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mina. Paul Montoya, is this Paul? So, Siania, you're one of the younger ones here, and you're literally the younger one of the group here, from what I know. From your perspective, from what you've heard, obviously you've grown up hearing about September 11th. You probably read or heard in class, in school about September 11th, the impact it has had on the nation. But hearing the stories from all of us or the individuals that have shared, what's your takeaway? What's your feel? What insights have you gained from hearing our stories here? Siania.
Yeah, so hi everyone, hope you're doing good. And I just want to give a thank you for being so vulnerable in your stories. It's really insightful. This is something they don't share in class. We learn about like the after effects and everything, but hearing it first hand from everyone who lived through it, that's different. So yeah, there's not much I can say about it since I was born after it, but I've seen a lot of videos, lots of images, such like the falling man, for example, where it shows a man falling off the tower and just falling to like certain doom. And it's so tragic seeing it and knowing, yeah, it's really scary just feeling to try to like sympathize with. But, and I do remember like one of like the after effects I do remember about it is that in elementary school, all the kids would be like a little wary and scared about 9/11. And they always look at the planes. Even though we lived in California, everyone would be like, oh no, what's going to happen on this day? There were still those effects, but yeah, it's a devastating tragedy, and with so many sad after outcomes, such as like Islamophobia, lots of increases in hate crime. It's very saddening. Yeah, I'm glad to see like there's been more awareness to the situation of what actually happened. And we are coming to a point where it is now like a part of history, but we will always remember it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Thank you for that insight. And, once again, this date is more to remember and to commemorate the individuals, the lives that are lost. And I wanted to open up the microphone and the platform to all of us to share some insight and perspective, right? And to allow us the opportunity to share our personal stories and our personal feelings. So I want to thank Mindy for starting it off and sharing what she went through. I want to thank Leo for sharing his recollection living in the East Coast. Mina, thank you for sharing the 2 individuals' names that were lost through Boeing and your situation during that particular day with your family activities and how it really turned your world upside down for that day. Victor, thank you for sharing the perspective as you were in Spain and how you viewed that, and what that perspective at an international level happened to be, right? And obviously, Isaac, thank you for sharing your perspective as a young school individual during that time frame and how it has shaped and morphed our nation in regards to what has happened, right? Sanya, being the younger one here in the group, thank you for sharing your insight and the value of hearing our stories and the stories that have been recounted here as to how that brings more value just besides reading it in a history book per se in school, right? And I really wanted to open it up so that we could all come together and share our perspective and share our insights. I want to be very respectful of this day and this whole situation, but I did want to open up the microphone in that manner. So Mina, it seems like you want to share one last thought. Yes.
I do. And one of the things was a very important and valuable life skill that was learned not only from the tragedy, but the educational and workforce side of things. Those that were going to be traveling to the future affected them. They did not want to fly anymore. They said, I'll take on-site travel assignments. So there was, I thought I heard someone mention that there was some counseling available. So mental health hit that department where we lost those 2 employees. It affected them. They went on leaves. I tell you, when you work in executive row and you're familiar with things, you know, what isn't within the walls stays within the walls. So I'm sharing all of this because that's already knowledge that's gone out, but it wasn't a thing of 1 day, 2 days, 3 weeks. It took so long to know what employees did not return and were they affected until they were identified. Anyone who has gone through those tragedies would understand it wasn't months. It took a while to get that information. So what that changed was who was going to travel, where, and why. What's the validity of your purpose for traveling? And it changed, at least for the Boeing company, it did, in the department that I worked, which is a satellite area, defining, you know, how much social do we really want to be out there? Unless you need to really be somewhere, you will be on a plane if you are willing to do that to support the company's values. That changed a lot of perspectives. And our travel went vroom, like this, as far as employees going here, there, and the other. So it affected the company, is what I'm trying to say. You know, putting people on planes, it affected all the airlines.
Yeah.
You know, so it does have a repercussion of other things.
It does. It does.
And even for yourself.
And part of that is how our nation changed, right? And we can see it today. And like it was mentioned earlier, you can definitely, even at the international level, you can see how it has had repercussions on the safety and the protocols of checking in and being able to security looking more at the passengers getting on. And if you have a ticket, you have to have a ticket in order to even walk into the airport terminal, period. Before you did not. Anybody could literally walk up to the terminal, say goodbye to their loved ones, or go wait for them as they're coming out of the aircraft and whatnot. But nowadays, if you don't have a ticket that identifies you as an individual with a purpose of flight somewhere, you cannot enter the terminal. There's checkpoints all over in various airport locations, and that's not only at the U.S. level, that's at a national level. So that's one of the big things that has changed for all of us here to make note. But in addition, the way that we view ourselves, we're, you know, at the U.S. level, we're not invincible. We have weaknesses, and I think Victor alluded to that very well. He said, you know, from their perspective, they're looking at the West and they're saying, oh, wow, they're getting attacked. And one of the things that I'm going to finish it off is my wife and I had a conversation a while back, and I told her the U.S. has never had a real physical attack on U.S. soil until 2001 literally took place, right? Before that, it was the Cold War. Before that, it was Korea. Before that, it was Vietnam. Before that, at some point in the 90s, it was Iraq and Afghanistan. But those are far, far away places and out of sight, out of mind, literally. But when this happens, like Isaac mentioned, it's a personal attack. It's an attack on your homeland. And even though the U.S. is far, large, and wide, Leo alluded to very well the situation of, okay, this is happening in the East Coast. And Mina, you felt it, I felt it, and those things are literally ground shaking for us because it shakes who you are and it shakes the perspective of the country and the patriotism to some extent, right? And I say patriotism because we all live here and we all work for companies that are part of the U.S. and companies that deal with the economy and companies that, for the most part, Department of Defense, you're literally there to support the warfighter and you're literally there to support the freedoms that are being stipulated by the U.S. Constitution. So that's what you're there for, right? So with that being said, we all get affected. We all literally have a stake and say on things, and I'm glad that we got to share and provide our recollection of how this is. One last comment, Mina, and then we'll close it up.
It's not a comment. It's just I would like to open up the mic to Mr. Victor Robles, who joined us.
Oh.
But maybe his perspective of where he was.
Yeah.
If you could share a little something, that way everyone was included today.
Yes, for sure. Victor, thank you for joining us. I didn't even see you there. I think you joined a little late. We're talking about 2001, September 11th. I don't know if your recollection, where you were, what your perspective is, if you can share some insight.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I logged in late, but I'm glad that I did. Again, like things that I remember, it's just getting out of teachers gathering us, chaos. But one thing that I always remember, it's the fact that seeing like TV and the firemen and the EMS, and I think that now, like, when you're older, you realize that they knew that they were not going to go and come out. They knew that they were going to have to go and go there, and they were not going to go and come out. So I think right now, when you were touching in regards of not being attacked in our soil, but the fact that all of a sudden you're put in that situation, you have to go and go up, right? Save someone, and you know that that's like you're going to go in there, you're not going to go and come out. So it's kind of like a last goodbye to your family, knowing that you're going to go and do something heroic. But I think that those people were selfless, and they knew that they had to go and do it no matter what. EMS, nurses, fire department, firemen, firewomen. And I think that's a lot of people forget about them because some people were very young and they had to go to like endure that. Some people were probably in the first week, first day, because they had to go and tell everybody. Right? It was like the worst case that you see in those movies that they're always talking about the end of the world, right? Now it's in front of you, and you have to go and react, and you have never been put in that situation, and you have to go there. And also the toll of the families that afterwards, right? The smoke and the ash and all that, and a lot of people had to go and breathe in, and it ended up, affecting them and dying later on. So even worse for them because they worked nearby or they worked at a place, and they knew colleagues or people that worked there, and they're no longer there. And then on top of that, them dying for like fumes or whatever they at the time. So it's a very, very serious. A lot of people, I cannot put it in the perspective of. Of course, I didn't hear the stories, but what you had mentioned, each one of the participants for this Cafecito that they went through, right? And what they saw as a result of that leap of the East Coast. So of course closer to that side. So I don't know. It's hard to go and put it in perspective, but just going to have that anchorage of being there and not being able either be able to go and do something or not be able to do something, or you had to go in and knowing that was going to be your last day on Earth. So, but yeah, appreciate the time that you gave me, and I appreciate being here because I appreciate each one of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for that insight. Just to close it out, one quick announcement. Next week on Wednesday, we will have Susana Valdez-Wolf join us. She is the ship CEO, and we will have Cafecito Chat conversation with her. We will start off with a couple questions that I have prepared for her, and then we'll open it up so that each one of us can have a question or conversation with her, similar to what we do in Cafecito Chat. So that'll be the format. So I hope that each one of you decides to join. It's going to be really cool and really fun to be up and personal with her and be able to have the opportunity to reach out to her on a live conversation via Zoom. So with that, I want to say thank you, Mina. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Victor Colominas. Thank you, Sanya, Mindy, Paul, Isaac. Thank you, Leo, who left earlier. But thank you for being here in Cafecito Chats, and I hope that this platform, this whole conversation about remembrance of September 11 has been useful and beneficial. Thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing insight. Have a good one. Hasta luego. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lázaro. Thanks for organizing.
Lázaro.